Celestine Star, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. Pleasure to have you on after I ran into you at the Contact in the Desert conference in California. That was a wonderful conference, fascinating conference. Pretty much as good, if not better, than Alien Con. That's a big statement, but I was at Alien Con 2 on the summer solstice, and if I had to choose between the two, I think maybe Contact in the Desert was actually a little bit more prominent in terms of the information and the hodgepodge of different people in terms of guests, vendors, and all the rest of it. So I'm glad I ran into you. It's a non-accident, of course, that I have you as a possible guest on my as a guest on my show. Had you as a possible guest when I contacted you and everybody else, but now it's for real, and it's great to be having you on. And I'd like to give you a chance now to tell your life story. And the work that you've done. I guess you said you want to start from your birth because it's been very metaphysical your whole entire life. And if that's the case, then, well, from a primary source perspective, you're definitely a worthy primary source to tell your life story from day one. And even if it was in the womb when you had metaphysical experiences, by all means, talk about that too. All the way up to the present day. And then there was something else you mentioned, something about a group or something. Why don't you do that after you tell your life story up till the present day? And then I promise not to interrupt you. I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I don't interrupt my guests. I may filibuster my guests before I give them the chance to talk a bit, but I will not interrupt them. And I'll make sure I have a little notepad here handy to jot down anything that I think is worthwhile of elaborating on if I hear you mention anything. So without further ado, you've got the floor, your life story. Tell us it all. Be educational, be enlightening. We're interested.
So thank you, Andrew. I'm so excited, and it was great seeing you at Contact in the Desert. I'm always thrilled to see what's happening with society and the movement towards the ultimate enlightenment and connection with our extraterrestrial ancestors. So my life has just been a journey of awakening. I sit here before you with galactic consciousness, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but let's begin at the beginning. So I was born on Christmas Eve of all times, a time of the Christ light coming in, but I was born into a metaphysical family. So both parents were very active in a very secret, arcane, magical grouping and of the highest degree. So their abilities and their consciousness was elevated to the point that they could affect elemental qualities. I was raised to understand about otherworldly existences as if it was normal. So we had the inner world of our household that was filled with understanding astronomy, astrology, all the metaphysical sciences, Hermeticism, alchemy. These were the things that I was brought up on as a child. And sitting in the biblical libraries of London, reading manuscripts in Latin and Coptic, and seeing the original great works of art just imprinted me with a consciousness that not only understood otherworldly aspects, but also interfaced with them, because I was trained to do out-of-body experiences in group. I mean, it was a very esoteric and enlightening part of my life. So we're going to move towards 6 years old, and there was a time when I realized that this metaphysical group, this occult group, was really self-serving, and it was really a struggle for me to kind of be pulled into this situation of the empowering, needing to rule over, to control, the scenarios that you read about often. And I had decided to take a sleeping pill because it lets you sleep, but I overdosed and went into a death state. And as I went into this state of death, I entered the light, and the light opened up, and I was greeted by 2 blue beings of illuminated light. And I call them celestial emissaries. They weren't angelic with wings. They were humanoid, but they were light energy, and they guided me through experiencing my life existence, the reading of the life. And then I entered the Godhead. So the word is, I say Godhead because it's as close as I could get you, Andrew, to the full immersion into creation. I did exist, and there was consciousness, there was communication, and eventually I was told I would have to return to my physical life, and at that point I said no. Later I recognized I told God no, but at the same time there was no judgment. It was just, well, let us show you what your life is going to be about. So I received more information, and this merging between the full extent of God essence in a way that I can't explain to you, and then coming back to individualization left me with awareness that carries with me today. I made the agreement that it would be good for me to return, but I would leave a portion of myself there in the celestial realms. So born, into the night, I'm 6 years old, born into the birthing of Christmas, the Christ Mass. That always carried through like a theme, a thread leading through the way. And so holding the holiness, the sacredness of the way has been my walk. Coming back into a 6-year-old body, I'm fully conscious. I believe, as they say, the 12 strands of the DNA is activated. And I had readouts on everyone I spoke to. I knew their past, present, future. I knew if they were going to go left or right, or if they spoke a word or said certain things, that their whole life path would unfold before me. I was, in a sense, a witness for creation, but at the same time, not really being able to engage and interface on a social basis because it was just so much information. I believe that my highest potential was active during that time, and it was hard for me to function and actually go to school as a 6-year-old. And it was required of me to go to school and kind of act like nothing happened, after coming back, staying in a coma, and then waking up and coming back into life. So 6 years old, coming now, our family, I was born in Michigan, moved to Alaska just before the Anchorage earthquake, coming into New Mexico. This was the big opening into the UFO activities. And to me, it answers a lot of the questions that people have of why are they here, what's going on. So 7 years old, we were in New Mexico. This is shortly before we go to England, where I was mainly raised. We're in New Mexico, where the Almagardo, where they're doing a lot of the atomic bomb testing. And there I was actually, my mother being Native American, she's also Egyptian, was Kemetic Egyptian from the deltas of Egypt. And she was Native American from North Carolina, Croatan. And so she was very involved in New Mexico in the Native American traditions of, I ran with Geronimo's grandson, great-grandson, and some of the scouts there had interaction with Arapaho, Apache, Navajo, Zuni, all of this. And the Sky people, the Sky Nation, was very prominent. In a lot of the council circles, I learned about the council, the medicine wheel, and a beautiful woman named Ruby Sky taught me the medicine wheel and the deepness of shamanism. So I tell you the basis of this because when the bombs were set off during the time when I was there was what I called a rippling. They tore the sky in two. Literally for days, you would see this warbling in the sky, delineating line. One side of the sky would be black, pitch black, and then there would be this delineating line, and the other part of the sky would be regular sunshine, birds flying, whatever. But the rest of the world was kind of blanked out for, quite a long time. And it could be seen for miles. So I believe I have located one person who may have witnessed this. And so I just want to say that this nuclear testing, all of this atomic bomb testing does more than just put radiation into the world. It actually tore the sky. And I am witness to that along with many other people. The Native Americans then at that time started dancing the ghost dance because they talked about the world losing its tilt, which scientifically we learned about that. The Earth's axis, I think 17 degrees moved, and actually we shifted the Earth's axis slightly at that time through the testing, and this was in 1959. We had, they said they couldn't call the people, they couldn't use the same chant to call the spirit. Everything had shifted for them. And although I was taking all this in, I could totally understand because we had snowstorms on one side of the, I'd step out of my house and on one side of the yard was snow, and then the delineating line and the other side of the house was totally sunshine. So I knew something was going on a paranormal level, but it was not ever registered, scientifically analyzed, or even spoken about in any of the newspapers, reporters, investigations. I've still yet to hear that and would love to hear from anybody who has those experiences. I do say again, I think I've found someone who may have been there at the same time. One of the interesting things about that time for me was being in the old Studebakers and the old Fords that were rolling down the freeways. You imagine in these long stretches of roads in New Mexico at the time, you'd be driving down the freeway and all the cars would stop simultaneously. Everyone would get out of the cars, and you have to imagine moms and pops and kids all standing. And as we gazed up into the horizon there, here comes a huge flying ship. It's a craft. It's, football fields long, more than one football field, and it's silver. I remember it glistening, the sun glistening off the metal of it. And as you could see opening portals as it just glided by, and it flew low, the first one, flew low over the heavens and just flew out of sight. As it was going out of sight, the engines automatically would start up again. Everybody gets in their car. And, there was a silence in all of this. Nobody was saying, gee, I wonder what that is. They would just kind of glance at each other. The grown-ups get in the car, the kids in the back, and off we go, we're rolling again. I believe one time that this occurred was there was mention of, gee, is that a government craft? Is this a government, aircraft? And so that was just about it. And again, nothing in the newspaper, no scientific investigations, and even the Blue Book Project, I have no idea. I've never heard of it being written about at that time. So here we are, becoming Skywatch people. From that point on, my stepfather would sit outside and watch these ships go by on a constant basis. There was always something maneuvering past us. In the place where we lived, you could just sit outside and watch the sky. And his connotation from that time on is I'm a Martian and they're going to come and get me. Kind of a family joke, but in reality, I in some ways believed him. So he had the bright idea one day to put us all in the car, and the ship came. He got us in the car, and he began to follow it. We didn't know why he was driving so long and far out into the desert. We didn't even know he was following the ship, but unbeknownst to us, he followed it until it came to a landing. All of us in the car were suddenly teleported into the ship. My brother was extremely traumatized by it. He drew the pictures of the beings, the tall grays with the, bulbed heads and the big eyes. For me, it was again this otherworldly energies. We had already seen spirits. We'd already understood that there were beings of different qualities from other worlds, multidimensional. So I was very observant, even though it was painful. We were examined. Later, having experience with other ultra-terrestrials, which is what I call them, I was told that they were investigating humanity because we had torn the sky. Also, I was told that we were being given DDT, different chemicals in our foods because they would spray, coming back from World War II, I think the chemical companies gave it to the farming industry for weeds and bug insecticides, and the spraying into our food was of concern because obviously we were the children, I quote myself, we are the children of the chemical age, opiates in our cough syrup, cocaine in our drinks, we've got DDT, and of course the radiation going on from the testing. So I believe that some of these abductions maybe be to check on humanity, to see the mutations in the DNA. I know that permission was given, by the government to do this. And later, I think it was substantiated. So these things happened, and we were examined. That was my first kind of, you would say, off-planet species contact. And we were again then put into the car. I don't remember how we got home, and my life continued on because it was so esoteric. There was so much metaphysics going on, and of course I was, wide open with digital readouts on everything going on. So you can imagine my mind at that time. So later we moved shortly to California, Northern California, to Marin, and then off to England. England was again diving deep back into the Hermeticism, the arcane magic. There was not much interaction at that time, but my consciousness was evolving to have strength within myself to step out of the cult circle at the age of 15. I just said that was it for me. And I went on a quest in search of what was the truth of what was in the Bible, research on what was told, all the ancient stories. Ezekiel, was definitely prominent because of his off-planet experiences, the quest for the Christos, and all of that. So I began kind of the research of looking something like William Henry into the arcane art and the symbolism, which I've been taught to follow the trail that leads you to the higher dimensions. I was always on the trail for creation and love and truth and discovering that. At the time when we came back from England into the 60s, the late 60s, we're facing, of course, the great upheaval coming to the Rock, which was America. We had Kent State murders and Watts was burning. Everybody had to be black, white, red, or yellow. And from an English being raised in such a place that's more nationalism, I couldn't believe America was so torn apart, and we continue this lower evolutionary process of trying to get up and over our own selves and just see that we are one species, But anyway, I continued doing my metaphysical studies privately and eventually ran into a beautiful man, Ernest Robert Hunt, who turned out to be a special forces agent. And I married him, then found out the deepness of how he was connected. And our lives began to unfold. We had a beautiful child who was divinely given to us, and off we went to Italy, which was a place of the military and bringing nuclear weapons into Europe and some of the high-level security stuff, secret stuff, and eventually ended in Edwards Air Force Base, which is a deep story that I will hold for a time, but just know that Ernest became flight chief over Edwards Air Force Base. And this particular, we're doing some special work there to bring out to humanity concerning Edwards Air Force Base. It's a very interesting place, but just know that I had further contact again with what I call off planet, because they're really not living here. And they're working in conjunction, this intelligence, this species particular, that really touched Ernest in a way that he felt the world should know. And he decided if the world couldn't know, that he couldn't support hiding this secret. So having this kind of dark side of the moon information and experiences at Edwards, I also experienced a little bit of what I would call probably the inner workings of mind control and things like that. So this is being well investigated, and I hope to speak to you when I'm able to bring out more about this, Andrew. And but it's an interesting story. I could go on about the dark side of this secret space programs and things like that, and Ernest. But just know that he cared enough about humanity. He stepped out and took the truth with him. And from what I understand, anyone who really is talking about their times with the government, I know for a fact that our family was threatened. Our lives were threatened even until his death. I tried to get him to come and talk or put it into tape or share what he knew, and he just couldn't do it. He said, we would both be killed. And so they held him, and held us hostage over that. That's how important the information was. So from there, we came up into Northern California. Eventually, Ernest and I separated. It was for the best. I ended up in a beautiful place after a time in San Francisco, up in the high mountains of California. That is where I met my first really illuminated beings, the highest spiritual council. And I stumbled upon, I was guided to, it was very interesting. Sheriff Keyes gave us, I said, where do we go to walk and paint and be safe? And, we're in Middletown, and I had my optical shop there. And he said, you just want to go up there on this particular land. We eventually called the Buddha Canyon. Little beknownst to me, it's an archaeological site. It dates back to the stone builders. And I took my Egyptian cousin, Fadl God. He comes up and he looks, and he says, sure enough, this is pre-Indian. And this beautiful area is filled with, it seems like they call it the treasure chest of Lumeria, but people that come there, they begin to see the city, and I begin to notice things that were different. Pyramids were there. One place I called the Terma, which was electromagnetically laid out, so watches would go forward and backwards. It did different things. You could teleport. People teleported in time and space, and so what I got eventually was, we recognized there's just 3 or 4 of us that were on the trails there, and we began to see that this was a place of the extraterrestrials. Little did I know that they lived there, and so we say ultra-terrestrials because we ultimately live here they never left. So that was the secret. They have never left, and they've been a part of my life. And slowly, they opened themselves after years and years and years of going into this wilderness. 980 acres of prime, beautiful Miwok Pomo Vision Quest land turns out to be the lands of the Star people, the Star Nation. So I opened up the Temple of Light there in Middletown on my little 5-acre ranch, and we did ceremonies and honorings, and we had light orbs appear and connections. And I was doing channeling. I had begun channeling back in 1985 when my mother passed. It triggered in me something that enabled me to go out of my body and channel Meso, keeper of the books of the Seventh Council. So I have about 15 years of being indoctrinated into this high level of conscious awareness about how we manifest our state of reality here, different aspects of the multi-dimensional universes, and it just embedded in me the truth of all truth. So here I am with this Temple of Light and meeting these galactics, channeling Meso, Chiron, Metatron, but keeping it secret. You see, everybody else was out on the world market, But for me, I had the freedom. I didn't have the cluster of people asking me what's going on. I became a yogini in the forest. I spent more time in the forest, less time eating and socializing, but people would come from all over the world and work with me. I would work with them. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I do alchemical hypnotherapy. I did neurosensory development with a photonic light instrument called the Lumitron, studying under Dr. Downing. And so, I had the practical groundedness of a therapeutic practice along with the metaphysics and this awakening that was happening. But I spent more and more time in the forest. Suddenly, the immortals would appear to me. And when I say that, the first time I never even realized, you hear of the rainbow body, yes, the rainbow body, but to have somebody physically appear, the first one was Tylee Poe, and he appeared looking at the bushes. I was up in the mountains meditating, and the tree began to shake, and all of a sudden there was kind of like you see that clear, watery looking essence and a shape and form, and then all of a sudden there was a man standing in front of me, this Oriental man with beard. Now, I've been an empath. I see into inner worlds. I'm very highly sensitive, and but this was beyond what I had experienced before. After my body stopped shaking, eventually he just stood still and just calmness, and then I realized he was not going to harm me, and I just sat quietly and spoke with him for some time. And eventually he just disappeared. He just slowly kind of evaporated out of the setting. So I've had experiences with the immortals, Babaji, Yoshi Sojo, and then you have the galactic experience. I became an ambassador, an intermediary between the Star Nation and humanity. And that began my walk eventually for 15 years up in the mountains, and eventually was sent down the mountains to come down to be with you, Andrew. And it's been amazing. Down in Marin, I'm going to continue a little bit longer. So coming down, I spent time, in Santa Cruz, there doing lots of ceremonies, connecting with very amazing people of the technology, Nassim Harim, and all of those people were a part of that group. And we all kind of evolve together, and we could talk openly about any subjects of science and technology. And I'm totally into quantum physics and all of these things. And so we all grew by sharing information. And eventually I ended up back in Marin. So here we have Marin establishing myself, but I quietly were on the trail, going out to the ancestors and the sky people, always sky watch, always connecting. Brought some crystals, this canyon had the beautiful white quartz crystals. Brought some down to Marin and found a place to hike it in and left some crystals there. And unbeknownst to me, there was a landing. I could tell there was a landing because the Earth, you see, when their anti-gravity ships come down, their scout ships are about 16 feet wide, and they take off again. They lift off the Earth, but they leave the plant. This tells you these people are highly intelligent. The rocks move around, the dirt moves around, but the plants generally stay rooted. And wherever they land, the energy days afterwards is really heightened, so there's a greening effect. You can see the bright lime green, and it's just a really high level. And so they had actually located the crystals that I had planted from up above, brought down from Middletown. And so I was elated to reconnect with the star people in a way that they acknowledged them and let me know that the crystal I brought out of the mountains was somehow activated by the mountain or activated and connecting them. So the connection opened. I've been under Stargate. I have, in the book, you'll see pictures of the Stargate as it opened as I drove from San Rafael to Santa Rosa. The Stargate opened, so I took pictures. I've always been archiving all the way. Again, the oil spill happened, and that changed my life. My daughter had the child. I'm living with her, and I believe in April 2010, the oil spill, the BP oil spill happened in the Gulf of Mexico. That went on for 2 months, and in May of 2010, the fleet, and I mean a fleet of starships appeared, starcraft, starships appeared in the heavens over Northern California. I'm driving from Hercules to Marin, where I worked, and I couldn't believe the number of ships. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is a staging area, and we are in trouble because no one, BP couldn't stop the oil leak. It was announced they would take till August. Things were happening. The animal life was dying. The ocean was getting in problems, getting in trouble. And so I said, this is it. Let's see what's going to happen here. You have to really have your synapses connected to be able to see them. But for me, it was very easy. Eventually, for 3 days, the ship hovered over our house in Hercules. I went out on the balcony and I just said the words, glory in the light of the radiant one, which is the mantra I've been given by the high spiritual council to greet anyone of the ultra-terrestrial nature or galactic intelligence. And I was signaled back immediately and told to gather as many humans as I could and make it to a high mountain. And I was shown the high mountain, and we ended up going in a place in Fairfax where I would later do Skywatch for 5 years. And we brought people there. It was about 30 of us, and I decided I was inspired to do it as a council circle. So that was when the Galactic Earth Council was born. We opened the circle in rounds of prayers to the Mother and to the Father Sky, Mother Earth, Father Sky. And then what you have is a round of, what intention do we have? Do we give them permission to help us Yes, it was unanimous. And suddenly the ships came out, and the command ships and the terrestrial ships and the scout ships, and everyone was screaming, and we danced into the night. And I asked, everybody with their boarding passes. I gave out Galactic Earth Council boarding passes, and we all decided, yes, we wanted to meet again. So really, that was a mass disclosure. We stayed connected for the next 5 years. I went through a process of having open circles and then just the advanced, those that really had their synapses open or their consciousness open enough to see them, know them, and really have advanced evolution of consciousness. Uh, it's really kind of a good state of being to go out and commune. And for the open circles, for those newbies, they took a lot of time. And when I say they, the Galactic Star Federation and the High Council, a High Spiritual Council would come, and they would show us things like an airplane hologram, and they would point, oh, that's just an airplane. Now we're sitting in a place with no airplane flight, and it's not a commercial flight route, and they come in, and maybe they take one wing off. Maybe they divide the ship into two and into four and then bring it back together, and they circle around and do it again until the person says there is no, that is not an airplane. They've etched for one doctor that I took out, him and his wife, they etched the silhouette of San Francisco, which we were looking at. He was looking at San Francisco. They etched it in a cloud and then lit it up for him. And after the sun went down, and he couldn't deny that this was something otherworldly and that this was not just an airplane. This was an impossible feat. They love nature, the ultra-terrestrials and our star kin. They call themselves the star kin for me because the clans and kins and being raised in England, it's also the clan. So there's a kinship, there's a love, there's a unification. And so I want to just emphasize that I've seen both sides of the story. And the ones who are really holding the space are really the higher beings of benevolence. And so after 5 years, they told me to write the book. So there you have the book, The Galactic Earth Council, the reintegration of Earthkin and Starkin, the reintegration of Earthkin and Starkin. And it unfolds my life, but also it unfolds the plan. The Simpreth is what they call it, the divine plan to reunite humanity with our galactic origins, with who we truly are, to reunite with all of creation. There's already star fleets ready to take us where we need to go. They live in septicles, which is interfaced, interdimensional living cities and places of living that interface with Earth. The early times, they never lived on the planet. They just did resourcing. And so we now live on the planet, but we have the opportunity to move out into other states of existence. And so all this is happening whether the governments have any say-so or not. So I've been told that we are now in a state of preparation. We're no longer in disclosure. That passed many years ago. And that, so they've given me, some tools to work with people, the galactic origin sessions that open people so they can discover their galactic origins and that way safely return home. So for the last 10 years, July the 11th, 2019, it marks, almost 10 years doing this work with people in group. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew. I hope that was good information for your people.
Yes, very enlightening, very interesting. And But to hear you say we're past disclosure, what are you talking about, man? He would say, because I mean, many would assert that disclosure will not become official until the government and/or mainstream media acknowledge it. It's a fact of life, unfortunately, but for some reason, the alternative media and all the people that are making YouTube videos, like me and you and on whatnot, don't seem to count when it comes to official disclosure. And I've been hearing from other people in the contactee realm, well, there's different time periods. Like Bashar has said something like the late 2030s, early 2040s, as the time when true disclosure happens. Brad Johnson, the Channels of Drones, has given 2050, and when I mean by true disclosure, that's the kind of disclosure when the ETs, for all intents and purposes, land on the White House lawn and say, here we are, we've been here a long time, you have no choice but to acknowledge that the ancient astronaut theorists and the UFO and ET nuts were right all along, because here we are, we've been here, now we're giving you true disclosure right in your face. That's not going to happen for another few decades, apparently, according to some ET contactees. Why the discrepancy in dates between like Bashar and Adronis, I'm not exactly sure. But for you to say that we're past disclosure would cause a lot of eyes to roll and a lot of head scratching. So, where exactly are you or are your contacts making that assertion?
We're making that assertion because for 5 years in group, over 10 years in a group, we have been having associations and contact with ultra-terrestrial beings. And each of us have benefited, those which I call the advanced galactic earth councils, have benefited, and their lives have elevated, have been elevated, their consciousness steady, they're leading beautiful lives, helping people in the world. But also because if you read in chapter 11 of the book, I was given a transmission of the world development and the era that's happening, the world from the place of the ultra-terrestrials. And with the shifting of the Earth from the lower part of the Milky Way to the upper part of the Milky Way, we move in an ecliptic orbit. And we pass through the center, right? This was all the 2013. Is it going to pulse as we took 20 years to pass through the center? And now we're up above. We're in a different placement in the Milky Way, having gone from the bottom to the top. There's an electromagnetic field shifting on the planet. We have more cosmic energy coming in. People are rising in their awareness due somewhat from the magnetic field at the North Pole, just the whole thing shifting and opening to more cosmic information. So in taking that in, people are just awakening. I've been told by the ultra-terrestrials they no longer have to cloak. This is one of the reasons why you're seeing them on their way transporting something. They are constantly vigilant over the governments and their nuclear weapons because of the tearing of the universe complex that happens. They are constantly monitoring. They have to, because we are not capable of monitoring ourselves as a human species. So I say disclosure has happened because I don't need the government to give me an official when I'm already working with them. I know about the secret programs. I could tell you exactly some of the difference, and it's going to come out, and it's okay. The government knows that the time is come. They're aware of it, and it's just this: how are we going to move mainstream into an awareness? Oh, let's do some UFO movies. Let's keep that pumping. Let's keep otherworldly beings and superheroes and all these kind of things going, so that the mass people will be able to accept it. The question is, do they want to try to do a black ops on humanity, which they, put out disinformation. They send out whistleblowers with disinformation. They send out, it's a constant movement. But I want to say, take it out of the realm of the government, because I would say it's not really the government, but rather private parties that are working in conjunction with ultra-terrestrial, or what you call alien. Anytime I hear alien, that tells me that it's this private sector that's been using technology to feed out to the mass people to make monetary gains. So yeah, they can roll their eyes, but France and England, usually there's many other countries, that Japan, we know, I led light group meetings, which they brought me information from all over the world back in 1980s. And, Russia has been in the forefront. Czechoslovakia. The world is gone beyond. So if you're not going to accept disclosure and you're waiting for the government to give some kind of official, you're wasting time, because it's already happening. And they have the right to say it's not official until it's official. But I, on behalf of the Galactic Star Federation and the High Spiritual Council, do declare that we are now in association, this human race is a part, as a species, of the greater family of cosmic intelligence. It is functional. It is happening. We're ready. They're kind and brilliant and loving, and if the hand is out, if you want it. So that's what I say.
Fair enough. And regarding some of the things that have happened recently to help humanity get out of the matrix, I mentioned Brad Johnson, who channels Adronis. He made a very significant video recently where he asserted that the moon is no longer under the thumb and under the control of Orion Gray factions that have been controlling it for a while and keeping us in what David Icke fans would call the Saturn Moon Matrix to, among other things, suppress the divine feminine around the Earth and such. Can you confirm in any way, shape, or form that the moon is now under great control behind benevolent forces? And if that is the case, what can we expect to see in the near future? Especially, I'm sure women would be especially interested about this, because being the ball chain around the feminine, it affects the women more than the men. So you'd have to think that, well, menstrual cycles and all, it's going to be much more pleasant for the women on Earth. Do you know anything about this?
I love you, Andrew. You're really great to talk to. I'm enjoying this conversation. I want to say first that, we were told that the moon was created. There's a lot connected to the moon as far as sectors of time and space. If you have an intelligent consciousness that's bigger than the Milky Way, they call that a sector. And so these consciousness can be of high vibrations and lower. So the moon was actually created, our moon, Saturn, and other planetary, the moons around Saturn and such, to act as a frequency balancer. So these were put in place to help balance the tone. They see us as one tone. Earth is one tone in relationship to the whole Sheshata or Milky Way. And so, yes, when they talk about these negative factions, the ultra-terrestrials see them as reverse consciousness. And so they are no longer, and I'd have to really double check at the extent of all of that, but I know that at this point, they are not in control of our moon. And the moon is actually being affected by the cosmic energies shifts that as we move into a new sector of time and space. it's really this new sector that has a higher frequency that's kind of modulating. And when you have reverse consciousness, it's generally caused by lower frequency modulations. And so when you say, are the women rising? Yes, we are awakening. The women are saying, gee, it's time for the planetary lineups. The physical body is interacting with a higher frequency, gives us strength and awareness and empowerment. And we're finding unity in that, and finding men awakening that find the unity. But back to the moon, from what I understand, it is there specifically to help in the balancing. There was a time when the Earth went through a very low frequency. The whole solar system went through one that was, they called the destructive period. And some of the planets went out of orbit and this is where you have the asteroid belt, things happen. So these moons were built, these moons were created using the supreme forces. You can read it in chapter 11. So I would stipulate that the beneficial forces are in control. And if you look at the crop circles, they're giving us messages to let us, they're putting it in England. England is Aberry, where the umbilical cord lineage lines come in from the heaven and connect us to the heavens, right? And so in Aberry area are the places of the crop circles that gives us the information, even if it's on a unconscious level, that they are in control. So all of the illusions that we see, the breaking down of political stuff, it has to happen in order for the structure, the new structure, to come forward. And I like the idea of women not having pain, but I think, I don't know if that's going to be happening, but I like the idea of that.
Right. And switching gears here, the bio here that Victoria Veneris, however you pronounce her name, put on your on a YouTube interview with you, has a lot of stuff here about dealing with oracle transmission stuff that you do. Now people hear that oracle and they think, okay, that has to do with seeing the future. So I'm interested to know, is that from your perspective what oracle stuff is, and if it is, how exactly do you look into the future, and how can you tap into the timelines that are the most probabilistic, or can you tap into timelines that are most probabilistic, because the future is always in motion, as Yoda told Luke Skywalker in Star Wars when he asked him, will Han and Leia be killed, and he said, difficult to see, Luke, always in motion the future is. So in that regard, how can you be sure you're looking at a probabilistic timeline?
Thank you. That's a good question. I am an oracle. That's Egypt is where my lineage is from. Demenhor, it's called now. The real Demenhor in Egypt there, down by the deltas. It was the first original oracle temples. I believe, the translation of the oracle was to connecting to the gods and the goddesses, receiving information from the higher. And I certainly do that. I give an oracle usually once a year. I'm heading to Delphi coming September, which I'm excited to do an actual oracle there at Delphi and have it recorded. So maybe I'll send you a recording of that. Last year I was sent to Stonehenge and we did one there. When the oracle comes, when the transmission comes into me and I'm doing an oracle, it's really timeless. It'll give kind of what is prominent for the world. It will give me what is prominent for the world to know at that moment. And I'm feeling when I'm doing the oracle, I'm reaching out into the creation, and it's coming in through the feminine aspect of creation. So I could say that that's what my oracles are. And that is different than when I do trance mediumship, which gives me a particular being might come in and start talking to you, the person, whoever's in front of me, and giving the ones that I work with are benevolent. They only speak in the highest good for all. But myself, I get prolific dreams. I get prolific, not even dreams. When something comes to me, a vision, I could be wide awake and I could be literally transported to another dimension, see the information, see what is going on there. I saw Katrina before it happened. My daughter was in Louisiana, and I was taken to a place. I saw the total destruction, the flooding, everything. And I came back. I called my daughter and said, "This is not a suggestion. You're packing your bags and coming out of Louisiana." And it was great because she said, "Okay." And when she got here, 2 weeks later, Katrina happened. I saw the Berlin Wall coming down. I've always had this ability, as I said, the DNA clicks on and, the information comes through. So I want to do a talk on timelines because in every moment you have the ability to go right or left or 360 degrees. And from right where you are, there's a timeline that can take you concerning what is your intent in your heart. So we are actually a group mind because we're here on Earth. The electromagnetic field is a group mind. The field is the outer form of thought, right? Electromagnetics. And so in it is the encodix of all of us together, kind of steering the ship, So each one of our individual belief systems actually takes us hither or dither. And so I'm able to sit where I am. If I connect to some of these politicians, their belief system, or even you say, let's take the Illuminati. If somebody says, "Oh, they're Illuminati." Well, that's a whole timeline. You can feel their mind essence. I can feel their intention because I am a part of them through the group mind. And so when I see that they're moving to a place using reverse consciousness, which means anyone with reverse consciousness, the ultra-terrestrials, they don't judge them, they just see it as so. They want to own everything. They want to destroy. They want to control. They want to, it's just everything that's not of the unified field. So I can follow along that timeline, and I see utter and total mayhem and destruction, unconscious without heart, and the destroying, which is there. You can see pockets of their timeline interface with the timelines of the human realities that are the farmers. There's an intensity of that in using GMO. And so if you follow that timeline of the GMO and you see the destructive qualities, you could follow it to the end, and it's going to eliminate and make extinct certain species. It could even be humanity. You could follow that in many different timelines. Okay, so but I see that you don't have to ride on that timeline. I don't have to. I have the choice. My free will says, I can pull my energy in off of that destructive timeline. We have the power through our intent to be on a timeline that is filled with evolution of consciousness, of compassion, of balance in working together, coming together as one species. That's the timeline I'm on. And I ask people to join me on that, and all the listeners there, check in your heart. If you're going on and on and on about the negativity that's in the world, you're actually feeding that timeline. So I tell people that if you say something of, the destructive nature, Nostradamus, all these things that are predicted, these are only probable futures. And by no means does it mean it's actually going to happen. Probable futures. And that if they put it out there, to put something out there in balance of that and say, okay, this is also happening, that we are going to make it through this phase of shifting magnetic fields and not raising of the frequencies. We're going to modulate our auric field, and we're going to be able to connect with that. And we have plenty of help from our earthly galactic intelligence that knows how to guide us. So I hope that answered your question.
Oh, you did a pretty good job there, I think, making sense of it, because it is a controversial and confusing subject, looking into the future and understanding how oracles do what they do. But of course, it shouldn't be confusing when you realize space and time are illusions and everything is happening all at once. So, but then again, the whole multiple timelines thing does make it all the more confusing, I should say, on the flip side of that. But anyhow, I'd like to get into some of these other things that you are really into. Looking at you from your, it's all on the inside of the person that matters, but from the outside, you have like ancient Egypt written all over you. Looking at you, you look like an Egyptian queen, some would say, and it seems like you're really big on the whole ISIS thing. And a lot of people hear ISIS nowadays, and they think Islamic radicals who want to kill everything. Well, no, that's not what. That's the dark side of it. There's a lot of good things regarding ISIS, the Egyptian queen, and the things that can be learned from the mystery schools of Egypt that ISIS could have relation to. How many temples of ISIS are there? Because you're Temple of ISIS a lot. Well, I'm sure there's more than one. And is that some sort of a name for a whole series of different locations where people learn different things? And what do you have to do regarding the work of ISIS? And what is it about, I guess I should say, the stuff from ancient Egypt that you think needs to be brought up to the attention of the world? I did have Carmen Bolter on my show that talked all about how ancient Egypt is nothing like what the mainstream textbooks tell us it is. And I'd like to give you the opportunity now to explain that and then elaborate on that in great detail. Tell us the things about Egypt and ISIS and the rest of the Egyptian gods that the textbooks don't tell us. What do you know?
So thank you very much. I'd love to speak about the Egyptian goddess Isis, Aset, and she had a twin, Nephthys, and my primary spirit, my soul self, is connected to Nephthys, her twin. And I recognize my star self, my galactic consciousness, my original self, coming with Aset and Thoth, or Ajwa as we called him, through the stargates from Sirius. So I have a direct memory of that. But to bring it in focus here, Isis was, you have to imagine, coming into the stargates and being here on Earth, a part of the original galactic intelligence that was here assisting in the development of Earth. There was a time on Earth when Earth was an educational place. It was a place of learning. And I think that's embedded deeply still in our matrix. And that's why education and learning and knowledge is so important to us all. But some of this learning and the temples were embedded. And Nephthys, my own spirit soul, was a part of stationing these temples along the way. But they didn't come into play until the time of the Great Flood. And so a lot of the stone building and a lot of these huge complexes that will last the test of time were being put in during these times, a lot of the temples. And they give individual teaching. So Isis, her particular teaching had to do with birthing. So imagine after the floods, and the humanities and human, when we say human, that's the signature form for the earth. Everyone is a galactic having a human experience, but her work was to birth humanity, to help bring the bodies back onto the planet, to help develop civilization. And so she was honored as the mother of the world. And she, along with Quan Che Yin, who was another sister that came through Syria, she ended up in Asia, in the Asia parts. In the early days, Egypt had colonies. It was called Kemet. And you could still find our lineage, the native lineage, which has been really suppressed in modern day Egypt. But we had colonies all the way up into Syria, Lebanon, down into India, the Greek, the Babylonian, Sumerians, all over into Greece. We had colonies. And so the stronghold of the original ones was in the mountain of the moon at the base where the Nile begins. And so her mysteries are of beauty, of dance. Her temple Philae, which I dreamed about quite often as a child, until I finally went, it was very magical. These are doorways into otherworldly places. If you're conscious enough, you can enter these what's called sepulchres, or enter into these other realms, such as the halls of Amenti, Shambhala. The Gopi Desert has these different places. The City of Lights over Marin, California, over Shasta, these things. So Isis was definitely, she was a genetic engineer. As you can see on the walls of her temple, she made it very clear. And when you look at the hieroglyphs, one of the things that you can tell is those with wings were able to transcend the earth plane. And so they call them the netters. And that would be, the netteru, the gods and the goddesses. And so she was considered a goddess. Nephthys, her sister, and myself considered the goddess, the netteru. But they were also aspects, okay? So she was the feminine aspect of creation. So there was all these levels when you would go to the temple, just like Plato or Herodotus. You enter as an acolyte, you get the first level, then the second and the third. So each hieroglyphic opens up depending on your level of consciousness, and that's what maybe the audience should understand in going to the temples in Egypt. It's really your intention, it's your ability to open wide and just receive the information. But the Temple of Philae was a place where you could go into otherworldly realms. As a geneticist and engineer, she scientifically worked with the birthing of children. And so Osiris was the keeper of the, not so much the underworld, but as the Stargate. He, from my understanding, this is my own experience, was really from Orion, and him and his brother Seth was a mathematician, and they really give him a bad rap. I think the stories that were later were told of him murdering his brother, I think there was a lot of corruption there. But definitely that was to cover up the story of Horus being born through genetic engineering. And, but, so the temples for myself, Isis Oasis in Geyserville, California, Isis Oasis in Geyserville, California. That is a temple that was started by Lorian Vignay. And way back in the 70s, I knew her then. And she would gather, she had lived on Isis Street in San Francisco. She started working with exotic cats, and eventually it was outlawed. So she moved to Geyserville and started the temple Isis Oasis, the Temple of Isis. She connected in with the Fellowship of Isis in England with Olivia and Lady Olivia, and the two of them would give ordinations, and they began to ordain priestesses. So because I have the Temple of Light, I'm actually Egyptian, I didn't really feel a need to connect. And so way back 2010, I made a decision to connect with the beautiful people who come there. And they're very eclectic, very brilliant, very beautiful. And they spend time together offering their wisdom and knowledge and studies of Egypt and going into the deepness of the gods. Each year there's a theme, everybody comes together during convocation. And so I was ordained in 2010 in the Temple of Isis. But the work as an Egyptian, raised by an Egyptian high priestess, my mother, Mildred Barnes, or Brinces, which is the Egyptian name meaning prince, Mildred Barnes, Mildred Celestine Barnes. She taught me the metaphysics, the esoteric, and the different levels of the mystery school. It was extensive beyond thought. And I learned Hermeticism, alchemy. I think alchemy, if anybody studies anywhere, anyone can study alchemy. And in studying alchemy, you learn what happens when the supreme forces move through your life and how it changes. An example is calcination, the fiery breaking apart, dissolving your life, divorce, something happens terrible. And so then there's the dissolution where you have to pick the pieces up of your life, and then you have to formulate the formulation of your life. What are you going to do with that? And then rebuilding on that until finally you do this in repetition and refinement enough times. There's a psychological process in which you are strengthened and you're forged in the fires of time like a diamond, and you're ready to be trusted with a higher knowledge or the higher wisdom. And so all of a sudden, through polishing your mirror, you end up awakening to the consciousness, and there's a sacred marriage between the male and the female. There's a balancing between the outer and the inner, and the consciousness of creation and self, and then it just then becomes again the refinement until ultimately you awaken to your God consciousness or divinity or God. And the word God is Goad. It's the Egyptian word for mother, father. So let's see. Yes, the ISIS thing came in, and we did a lot of protests. The Temple of Isis did speak up. They did a talk at a congregation of spirituality a couple of times, and really had to be clear, that the temple and ISIS are not the same. And I think for the listeners, it's really getting to Egypt, feet on the ground. I've gone with the groups, and I've seen people transform as you go from Abu Simbel up to Cairo to the Great Pyramids. An example, a beautiful man from Texas, and he had his jokes and his Texas big hat and his boots, and he was just cracking up as he would just, go with the group in these different huge temple complexes. But as he got to Thebes, they've been building in the honor of God for thousands of years, and you feel the essence. There's no way slaves could build these things because they're too highly crafted, There's too much symbolism. It's too extensive. And to see him take off the hat, take off the boots, stop with the jokes, open his mouth open, just gazing into reality. And then by the time we got to Cairo, he asked me, can I buy an ankh, which is a beautiful Egyptian cross. And then we went into the pyramid, and at the bottom he says, take my hand, I have to do a prayer. And this man was on his knees, So I think feet on the ground, we did the prayer. He said, I'm going to do, our Father who art in heaven. But he ended up doing a prayer to the mother, So I want to honor Isis, and you asked me, is there one temple? She has thousands. She's known as the goddess of 1,000 names. She has temples everywhere. Paris is named, for Isis, Par Isis. There's some really hidden stuff about the Egyptians being up in the southern France and Paris. There's some hidden information about that. And you can look under David Wood's books, The Genes of Isis, Genesis. It's called Genesis by David Wood. Very amazing book to read on the geomancies, and there was so much to the early Egyptians. They lived in geometrical forms, energy fields, dimensional connotations. I am so honored to be Egyptian in that way. And so we have the Greeks that took on Egypt. So that's why, Egypt was actually a shept. It was a place in Egypt, and the Greeks kind of used it as a nickname. So when you say you're going to a shept, it eventually became Egypt. And so somebody said, well, I'm going to Egypt, instead of saying I'm going to Kemet, which was the Black Lands because of the fertile lands of the Nile. And, I think just to go there would be extraordinary. But she has temples in many of the cathedrals were the Catholic Church built Christian cathedrals on top of where her temples are. And we're going to Crete to learn about that and go to some of her temples. She was the patron of the sailors who went to sea because she cared for everyone so deeply. She was the queen of the world. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, we could talk a lot more about all the other characters of Egypt, but Isis seems to be your one of importance. So let's leave it to that because there's so many other things we could talk about regarding what you've done. And I'd like to get specifically to the book, Galactic Earth Council: Reintegration of Earthkin and Starkin. I guess I might as well ask you to give a Cliff's Notes version of the book, spoiler alert of sorts, and people more than welcome to buy it. But what exactly is the stuff, if I had to give you a brief moment on this show to get the important things out as a primer for anyone who's looking to buy this book and read it, the important things that are worth getting at, if you had to say, well, these are the things in the book that that I think all of humanity should know, especially people that aren't going to be able to read the book, now's your chance to do it.
Beautiful. Thank you. So the Galactic Earth Council, reintegration of Earthkin and Starkin, opens the doorway to cosmic evolution of Earth through the direct and conscious reconnection of humanity and beings from the stars. So it enables you to come face to face with your heavenly origins. It is a book that is dedicated to my life, my memoirs, which if you look at your life and compare to mine, you will see the progression of yourself in evolving into galactic consciousness. We're all heading that way. As the frequencies increase, you're going to be able to access more information. So by reading the connotations of my life, I think you'll get a lot out of that. So it talks about an environmental catastrophe in the past 30 years that attracted the attention of the fleet of the Galactic Star Federation. And for that, they came to assist, and they did, because after that ceremony on July the 11th, 2010, 2 days later, a 22-ton apparatus came out of nowhere, and they stopped the leak. We don't know what happened, but we'd like to say that we did get permission, and perhaps we were helpful in that. So you'll learn the deeper mystery of Earth's galactic awakening, and through the disaster and how our group came together, you'll receive a deeper understanding through the historical account of the Starkin. So chapter 11 is paramount. I've had NASA scientists read it, and he is ready to dive deep into it, and it's encoded. So each person who reads chapter 11 of the Galactic Earth Council book receives something for themselves to awaken. And I gave it on purpose to this NASA scientist, and he just said this was amazing, and he was going to do some research for me and for himself. So I'd say, if nothing else, read the transmission. It enables you. It's a safe roadmap for those of you who want to understand how to be with the Galactics. I specifically wrote it so you could understand. And I would suggest highly to learn about your galactic origins. We will be doing a study group on Chapter 11, and there's information on the website about that, and also how to get your galactic origins, because once you know who you are, then being with other galactics, it isn't as much of fearful. You'll have more openness and awareness. So it is a manual that will give you the tools to safely follow a lit-filled pathway in reconnecting with our ultra-terrestrial star kin. I put the voices of the advanced in the book. Those that have walked with me, the Advanced Galactic Earth Council also wrote their pieces in there. And there's photographs, so you could see some of the archived photographs of our walks, and how everyone is thrilled and happy. No abductions. There's never been anything really negative happen. We've had some government agents or the private sector of space program come, and it's just an open space because we are there with the Creator. So that's what I would say. It's just a really good book. It's been edited by a university professor, Giovanni Singleton. So we have good standing. It's a good, solid reference book.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to get into a little bit more of a sensitive and disturbing subject. I believe I did bring this to your attention when I ran into you at Contact in the Desert. The whole idea of the extent to which our ET brethren are willing to come and save us, for lack of a better phrase. And the scenario that I brought up to you was the fact that Tolek, the contact of the Andromeda Council, he was threatened after he went on Alfred Weber's radio show to talk about how there are undersea and underwater, underground reptilian and gray bases. He gave the precise location of them. He claimed at a conference that he gave that I was at that he was contacted by someone in the NSA who basically told him, stop giving the locations these underground and undersea reptilian bases or you and your family will be dead. And he, for a little while, kept a low profile as a result of that. But what I don't quite understand, what kind of drives me a little nuts, and here's another scenario I need to point out. Sheldon Neidl, the contactee of the Galactic Federation of Light, not to be confused with the Malevolent Galactic Federation of Light that masquerades as a benevolent council. This is the strictly benevolent one that he contacts. Sheldon Neidl has been out of commission for a little while because he was attacked by some sort of a direct energy weapon. And what really disturbs me about his scenario, and also Tolek's, was that their ET brethren did not bother to act as a shield, an alien shield, if you will, to interfere and protect them. And like in Sheldon Idle's case, protect them from getting attacked by the direct energy weapon. And in Tolek's case, I kind of wonder, well, Tolek, shouldn't you have gone to your Andromeda Council contacts and told them, excuse me, I've just been death threatened by the NSA, saying that if I keep talking about these reptilian bases, they're going to kill me. I do want to keep talking about this stuff, so if they try to come and kill me, could you save my life, please, and intervene and protect me? And I asked him about that, and he actually said that his ET contacts would not protect him. They would actually let him die because they follow, for whatever the reason, this very, very strict protocol of we need to let the humans do it themselves and we cannot intervene. But that kind of disturbs me because I kind of see that as being basically what Spider-Man did. Spider-Man, anybody knows Spider-Man's a fan of him, knows that the turning point in his life was not when he was bitten by the spider, but was when he let that crook get away that the police were chasing in an arena. Spider-Man let the crook go, and the police said, help us catch that guy. And the police said, with your great powers, you could have stopped him. And Spider-Man was like, hey, that's your job, pal. I live on these streets. He basically did that as a way of telling the human race, I'm sick and tired of you shunning me. This is your punishment. I'm not going to stop this crook. Well, that turned out to be a mistake because that same crook murdered his uncle later that night. And when he tracked down the crook at a warehouse, he discovered that it was that crook that he let go. And he realized if he had intervened, his uncle would still be alive. And I kind of sort of can't help but shift blame on the ET contacts, the ETs, like the Galactic Federation of Light, for Sheldon Neidl getting attacked by the direct energy weapon, and had Tolek continued to talk and gotten murdered, I would have basically said to his ET contacts, with your powers, you could have saved him. What's your problem following this ridiculous ideology of we need to let the humans do it themselves, and if they have to suffer, then so be it. Well, you've been in contact with the higher entities. Could you help make sense of this phenomenon? And then after you do, there's a specific subject in this field that I want to touch on for a little bit, but let's talk about this for a little bit. What is it that makes the ETs follow this rule?
Thank you. I just want to take that in with a breath and get clear how I want to share with you. So, being a wife of a head of security over a particular area that was sensitive to this enactment of alien species, having experienced my life being threatened, and placed in harm's way through my husband, and living with that throughout our whole life. I see the President Obama, I see his children are captured. I know that there is, things happening in the Senate, the same thing, where they're frozen, they can't move in behalf of humanity because the pressure's on, So that's a real life thing. And I want to say during 9/11, I have a media company, Golden Star Productions, and I took it upon myself to go and film and archive 9/11 and became involved with the gentleman. We became partners and lovers, and we filmed, but he was so angry. He went up against the government. He wanted to take them down and prove, and eventually I did do a film, 9/11 Proof, 9/11, the proof is in your hands. And it was with 2 investigative reporters, and it's still selling today. But during that time, he was so much up against the government, wanting to shut them down, that suddenly we were having this off-planet, just what you're saying, a dark energy weapon that was affecting the front lobal area, lobal area of the brain, and the person that I was involved with would speak to me, and I would hear something else, and I would speak to them, and they would hear something else. It's very advanced science and technology. And there was such confusion. So finally I recognized, and we started writing to each other, and we realized that we were being attacked by this weapon. They got into the bank accounts, and being a wife of a special forces, you're trained to be aware of these things. So I have some training about that. And I understand that there are certain things that will, if these particular groupings are not feeling threatened, if these particular groupings, if you're not starting a revolution to shut them down, if you're not trying to murder them, if you're not trying to go up against this big, vast, it's huge. As my husband said, there's this certain level, and then those above it, you don't want to know. He said, just don't even want to know about it. So I get what you're saying, and I know Tolek, there's a few other investigative reporters who have been compromised, and I've just been watching from the sidelines, because remember, as I said, I've been hidden for a long time and developing my strength and my platform before I come forward. I understand what it is to be threatened. So to give answer I want to answer first the gentleman who was talking about, Tolek, who was talking about specifically where the reptilian bases are. So he chose, there's an agreement that has to be made in order to allow for these groupings to come and threaten him. There's a human interaction within himself that opened the way for them to come and shut him down. And what he was doing was telling the world, getting people up, and that's a form of revolution. If you're starting a revolution, you more than likely will be shut down, and they will do character assassinations. They will get into your bank. They will turn off your phone. They have the power to do these things. They just have the finance and the guns and the power. And they have other humans that are absolutely asleep and that only take orders, and they don't think about what it is that you're trying to do. It's a good thing to help humanity. They don't care. Now I'm going to talk about the Galactics. So the ones that I work with tell me that they work directly with what they call the Radiant One. The Radiant One is their creator. And at the time when, around 12,000 years ago or so, when the floods came and they shut down, they put a barrier between humanity and the galactic people, our family, our kinsmen, for the purpose of letting us grow. And it's almost like an incubator, because there was other times and periods of history when the reverse ones would come in and interfere, and actually the crossbreeding and all of that happened. So this time they said there would be some particular not laws, but I think they have to clear association with humanity through the Radiant One. So that's what I do know. That's an absolute. It's written in the book. You can read about it. It's happening. So I know for myself, I work from a place of creation. So I'm not here to shut down what's going on with the ones that have reverse consciousness, the reptilians and the negative ones. They are where they are, and they are being handled by the Galactic Star Federation. Everything is in place where it is needed to be, and by shining light into what I call the dragon's den, or trying to shut them down, we as a human species do not have the power to do that. It just, the intelligence level, we cannot do it on our own. And so, yes, you say, well, he said he was with the Andromedans and this and that. I do understand that. But his intent in giving the base locations was a personal intent. It was not in conjunction with, I can guarantee you, if I talked to him personally, he was not instructed by the Andromedans to go and give this information out to humanity. And Sheldon Idol, very much the same way, just, so character assassinations, the direct using the dark energy weapons, shutting you down, all of these things, these people are prominently keeping in the forefront the information about the reverse consciousness galactics. They are self-serving, and they will spend the extra time to shut you down. They will do that. And I would say that I would have to personally talk to Sheldon. I would have to personally talk to Tolek and say, what are you doing? Were you directed? I know they were not directed by the Andromedans to do this, because they don't see them as an enemy. They see them as beings of reverse consciousness. And so I would have to talk to them personally to get more about that. For myself, as I come out, my work is for consciousness to elevate, to awaken, because you will be fully empowered in your own life. And as you become fully empowered, you can go forward. I want to give a little information here. I was at Contact in the desert, and a beautiful investigative reporter came to me and wanted to do a story that had to do with my time with Ernest Hunt, my husband, my late husband. And when I began to speak about my experience, because I actually experienced seeing a reptilian, my body system went into fear because of remembering the intensity of seeing a reptilian. And it still takes my breath away. And as we were sitting outside at Contact, and this was about 3 years ago, one of the command ships appeared to make sure that I was okay. And I said, I want you to turn around to the reporter, and I wanted you to say, here's my protection. They were right there for me. The ship was there. It was huge. It was a beauty. It was a command ship, and I do know the difference between just a scout ship, maybe 16 feet across, and then these huge command ships, which are significantly bigger than, our largest airplanes, maybe 2 or 3 times the size. And he just sat very quiet, and they sent a light sequence to me. They're very telepathic, and they asked me if I was okay. And I said yes, and they signaled, and they went on about their business. So there is protection. I feel their protection on the psychic plane. Other psychics have seen my protectors. But I feel myself in strength. I protect my own self. And this is a part of what they are asking us to learn. We were the ones that blew the universe. We ripped the sky. We allowed this energy, reverse consciousness, to enter in a more substantial way. I could get into that a little bit more later. But because of this, the decision has been made to drop the veil completely so that we're all together as one unified existence, coexistence, such as we were 10,500 years ago. And it is truly up to us to learn about frequency, the raising and the lowering, how it affects and modulates consciousness, how it will help us to deal with the reptilians, and such as the Greys that want to utilize us for resources and things like that. I want to honor Fred Bell, who I worked with extensively in the 80s. He was one of the compadres of mine who had had the experience down in Laguna Beach of the underwater bases, and he talked about those quite extensively. But his contact with UFOs, he had off-planet beings living, at his house. Not living at his house, but he invited them over, and I met them several times. But he was instrumental in showing me about frequency, and he actually did an enactment in one of the underground bases where he put amplification around the base, and he lit up a sound wave that was so high frequency it was destroying these beings that were down in there, and their spaceships started taking off, lickety split, lickety split. So he showed me that we are not helpless, and that we can modulate our own lives. We don't have to attack them, but rather stay in our lane, develop ourselves, come into strength. All is null and void under the Radiant One. Call forth the Supreme forces, work with the supreme forces, work with our allies. And I'd also have to say, what was the agreement with the Andromedans, with Sheldon? Were they just to give him information? What was his interaction with them? So that was another question I would ask. I'd have to know more about it. I hope that's useful information for you.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Sheldon's the Galactic Federation of Light Tolix, the Andromeda Council, just to clarify there. You mentioned a few times the flood. I remember reading Michael Tsarian's book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation, Genetic Manipulation. He actually, I believe in that book, says that there were two great floods over the course of history that he cited, not just the one from about 10,500 BC, but specifically the one in 10,500 BC I want to get back to. I mean, when I interviewed Jordan Maxwell, he said in his in previous talks that he'd done, like, the story of Noah, that's just a repeat of some of the other stories, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and whatnot. So there was no Noah, and he says there was no great flood. But I told him, no, there was a flood. I mean, all the great civilizations throughout antiquity seem to cite it. Well, he said, okay, but I seriously doubt that there was any sort of a great flood on a global scale. I mean, the laws of physics and whatnot would not allow for such a flood on a global scale. Well, I think, with all due respect to Jordan, he's failing to take into account a couple of things here. Among others, it has been said by some that back in the time of Atlantis and before Atlantis too, there was some sort of a covering around the Earth of some sort of crystalline water structure of some sort, like monatomic water crystalline structure. Hard to describe exactly, but that structure, it has been said by some, one of the key things that helped start the Great Flood was that the fact that that structure was shut down and all the water in that structure came crashing down to Earth. Zachariah Sitchin in his books also talked about how floods were caused by Nibiru the Anunnaki's planet of Nibiru coming towards Earth and moving ice sheets from Antarctica off of the continent and causing them to slip into the ocean and causing massive tsunamis around the Earth, exacerbating the flood. So I'm wondering, I mean, is he accurate in that regard? And also this whole thing about some sort of a blanket of crystalline ice, monatomic structure around the Earth that was used to keep everything in perpetual harmony of sorts. Is there anything you can say about that thing causing the flood when it went defunct and came crashing down to Earth?
Yes, thank you. That's a very great question there. I would say yes, that from my transmissions from the highest spiritual council, yes, that there was more than one flood. They denote it to be the reversed ones, having the desire to go off planet, and so they break into what is called the time machine. And I think the first one, was caused the rift in Africa, and they broke into a time machine there and caused the rift to happen. And the second one was the astronomical one. And so I guess they called it what I'm trying to think, the canopy that went around the Earth. It was almost like it was a greenhouse. But also there's always this splitting of the crust. And so if you look at the Atlantic Ocean, you can see, if they drain the oceans, you can see the splitting from the north to the south. There's a crack, and there's volcanic activity still happening, but it almost cracked the Earth in two. And so up from the bottom of the Earth came the fissures of water, and down came the canopy, and that was the last one. And it came in sections, and it came in waves, and I think it did shift continents. But there was also at the very beginning, when the lower frequencies, the sector of time and space, it was not so much because of any interspecies interaction or any species reverse consciousness interaction with time machines or such, but it was the sector of time and space, and the frequency was so low that things started to shift. And actually, there was a breaking apart of our continent, and that's the first breaking apart of the continents and the floodings. And so chapter 11 is really a good one. I would say just to read that. It's going to give you the different eras, the era of destruction, and the time of coming together and bringing it back together. And it gives you kind of a timeline from their perspective of some of the things that happened in this case. But I'd say absolutely. I get over and over. I think it happened in 12,000 years ago, but the decision to break apart and split the galactics from they see the humanoid shape that we have as the signature biological unit, and they understand that we're galactic in our nature, but in order to evolve humanity, they separated and didn't allow for that intercommingling as easily. And in doing that, they always left the door open to the shamans, the temples. If you really had a desire to go home and you needed to be back with your galactic family, you went to the temples of the shamans. But yes, I would answer that question, yes, on a global scale, yes.
Thank you very much. And we've got a little over 10 minutes to go, so maybe one or two subjects. I did want to touch on this, but the flood thing caused me to digress a bit. But back to the thing about the ETs intervening. One thing that the ETs are allegedly intervening with, to some degree, and a lot of people here on Earth are trying to do this too, something that's been driving a lot of people crazy ever since 2012, and it's taking longer than it should. A lot of people are asserting this whole thing about the Nasara Global Currency Reset RV might happen next Tuesday is really getting annoying. And we've been hearing all this stuff about there's supposed to be some sort of a global currency reset where the dollar will be defunct and it will be, and all the other currencies, fractional reserve banking will be gone. We'll have a gold or silver-backed currency in place. Tolek has mentioned that his contacts have told him about a 10 to 15 year period where Earth transitions to no money whatsoever. I can't imagine how that could possibly get started until we get rid of fractional reserve banking and get this RV in place. But what's kind of driving me upset about this, driving a lot of people crazy, is the fact that we've been hearing about it for a while, and it's not really getting as far as we're led to believe it has been by some sources like James Gilland. And the excuse that they've given is, well, there's a lot of resistance from the bankers. The bankers aren't going to give in that easily. Well, okay, fair enough, but if you got ET forces out there that are helping us trying to get this RV thing in place, and these ET forces, in the words of Tolek, have the ability to shut down the powers that be in a heartbeat. If the powers that be were to hypothetically pull a doomsday switch, they could shut them down in a heartbeat if they wanted to. The good forces can. Well, why can't they shut the bankers down in a heartbeat and make this RV global currency reset happen next Tuesday? Well, one argument I've got to that is, well, if they did that, it would be too much of a shock to the system. The society can't handle it because they've been loaning us money that doesn't exist and charging us interest forever. It's not something we can just do overnight. Okay, well, it's taking way too long, and to be honest with you, I don't really see how we can break free of the matrix and slavery system and attain higher consciousness if they continue to loan us money that doesn't exist and charge us interest on it, because that makes debt and inflation unavoidable, which for all intents and purposes could, when it all comes down to it, be the ultimate weakest link that's being the last thing we need to break free to attain to higher consciousness. I'm sure you've been driven crazy by it too, to a great extent. So what have they told you about what the hell is taking this currency reset so long to manifest, and what hope do we have in the hopefully near future of eventually transitioning to money that actually has intrinsic value rather than money that doesn't exist, and maybe after a decade or two getting to no money at all and joining all the other civilizations out in the cosmos that, as Collier has been saying for years, don't use money at all and don't have their technology suppressed too, so everybody gets what they need and then some, because there's no technology suppressed either.
Love it. Thank you so much. Great conversation. So I will speak to you on behalf of Meso, keeper of the books of the Seventh Council. And what he shares with me is that we are the group mind. They call us the human seed consciousness. And as a group mind, we are entrenched in the belief system of currency. And so as long as we have no other idealism that will come forth to manifest, the currency will continue in the manner that it is, because that is what we need. The universe moves by need, not want. So we as a group, as a human species, can envision what we need. So councils of or groupings of beings sitting down and really mapping out ways that we can use. The coinage is just symbolism for exchange of energy. And so what do we need to happen? It has to be seeded. And there are uneven, let me just say, not so much uneven, but smaller groupings who are bringing back the gold-backed value, but there's not enough understanding of how to interject it into society at this time because of the lending and the false illusion that you have so much money being lent to you. There's no, it's like an invisible coins, as they call it, the digital numbers that are actually the exchange for your car. Your car is being exchanged for digital numbers. So if you're trying to bring it back to the gold standard, it takes an ingenious person, groupings, to sit down and say, how can we work this out? So what I was guided to see is that there are other time tracks that we will eventually have to leave that time track, the time track of money exchange for goods. And I agree with the other person that there is a time track for exchange of goods and services where there is no money. And so it can be separated in units of food, medical, and lifestyle, just breaking it down into so that medical is handled in a certain way, food is handled in a certain way, and what are the exchange? What can we do? And so humans not as a commodity, but to open to the field of a unified consciousness and allowing our primal awareness, and these are words that speak to that part of the humanity that is connected to all of creation and manifests out of will. We manifest because everything that we're doing, your life, Andrew, my life, we're all manifesting our own lives. You know, if we were on an island and we didn't have a bank, we would be manifesting the coconuts or whatever the food. You see survival and how they manifest their life in order to survive. So you put something out to the universe. They call it the kintsu, to put something really clear, this is what I need, and then watch it manifest. So if you have an ability to know that you could just manifest something, lickety split, snap, 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 and then you have that as you're moving forward, then you can create you can create what you need in a whole different scenario. So I want to open the field for us to just completely let that time track fall away and to step on to one of more clarity, unified consciousness, and that's what I see that we're moving towards. Knowing that each person is manifesting everything they need in every moment. And then we overlap our needs. An example would be, I was doing work in doing intuitive readings, and my partner said, I saw you as having so many people you didn't know how to keep up with it. Well, it turned out that I was really having a hard time keeping up with my clients because his need for me to have so many clients was overriding my need. So we interact together. We are a group mind. I think it brings us to that. And I love the idea of gold currency But again, it's honoring something as an exchange, and it takes us out of the realms of, are we really manifesting our world? And I think that's where we have to move to, learning how we actually manifest things in the world and then moving from there. And I think there's some great minds who can help guide us to that.
Well, I sure hope so too. So we've reached almost the 2 hour mark, so I'm going to give you the last couple minutes here to have you get out anything you like. Please give out your websites and your books again. Make a sales pitch out of this if you want. Also, any future events that you're going to be to, and close us out well. Celestine Star, please end the show on a high note.
Thank you. So you can get in contact with me, Celestine Star, and my website is galacticearthcouncil.com. And there you're going to find a place to sign up for our newsletters. We are currently doing an international global study group on Chapter 11. So if you want to join us, we've had 2 really successful readings. It's only 40 pages, but it's some of the most powerful reading that you can imagine. And so I just want to invite you for that. We're doing an actual sky watch here in Marin, Fairfax, Marin, California on the 23rd of August. I will be taking an open group up into the heavens, up into the mountains. It's a little bit of a trek up a little side of a mountain hill, and then we'll be under the stars there from 6:30 to 9:30. You can sign up at galacticearthcouncil.com and let us know that you are interested in Skywatch, and we can send you the information. I do galactic origins or star origins if you're interested in knowing where you came from, why you're here, and opening to your lineage. It's a safe way home. So let's just give me a sign up at the galacticearthcouncil.com, or you can email me at galacticearthcouncil@gmail.com. So you can email me directly and I will communicate with you. I'm so honored, Andrew Fisher, for the work you're doing, and I just love being here. I want to give praise and thank you. Glory in the light of the Radiant One. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and to the High Spiritual Council and the Galactic Federation, we send blessings to you and honor you for all your work. So thank you, listeners. We look forward to hearing from you. And understand that this world is our world, but we share it with the most amazing group of beings that you could ever imagine. Find your origins, open to that lineage, let go of those that are troubled with reverse consciousness, and open to the higher galactic, the galactic ones, and you will find paradise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will convert this to a YouTube compatible format tonight. I hope to have this uploaded to YouTube on the internet for everyone to see by midnight tomorrow at the absolute latest. I'll send you a link when I do. Good luck on everything you do. Fascinating interview to say the least. And hopefully I'll run into you at some future event. Take care, Celestine Star.
Yes.
Pleasure having you on. Take care.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Bye.